You're listening to Out of the Box, a place for marketers to get inspired, get going, and break out of the box.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to Out of the Box, the marketing podcast exploring out-of-the-box approaches to marketing and growth. Today on the show we have Will Larcom, who's account manager at Hannapin. Will, thank you so much for being on the show with us today.
Absolutely excited to be here.
So why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about Hannapin? How did you end up there? What does the agency do?
Yeah, absolutely. So Hannapin, we are a PPC agency. Got a start quite a while back by our CEO, actually, who to this day, we even have some of those clients that, were the single office room, if you will, 1 to 2 members doing everything, and grown quite considerably since. We have, like myself, my vertical is very specific in the app world in user acquisition. But we are not like a single vertical agency, if you will, which, I mean, given the current marketplace, has been a really large benefit to us. Been diversifying across a lot of those. But beyond that, actually big news from us that went public about 2 months or so ago is we got acquired or merged with Brain Labs, which is an agency out of London, a little bit bigger than us. And now we have expanded quite a bit more. Instead of just PPC, we're in really every aspect across the digital marketing landscape and SEO, and yeah, it's been a great experience working for them so far.
Do you find that sort of clients will take on what sort of more commonly take on full stack services from Hannapin and or Brain Labs, or will they sort of pick and choose, like, well, we'll just do PPC with you, we'll just do SEO?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think they would prefer that, right? When you are able to get that kind of full service agency and kind of consolidate a lot of that communication. And chances are, if an agency excels in one area, they probably have the infrastructure and training and background and resources to really do quite well in the other. But it's kind of early in the game for us right now. We very much expect that to be the case, but we're just kind of hitting the portion where we're looking to expand those services and really give everyone that full suite of offerings.
It's interesting in when we talk about game growth, we often talk about what we call the growth loop, which is kind of running growth as a kind of from a very holistic perspective and looking at kind of monetization and user acquisition or growth in kind of from from one view. As opposed to to dividing or siloing them up. Now, it's obviously it's easier to do this for mobile businesses or app businesses. It's probably easier for games specifically to do this. But do you sort of find that, especially working in an agency model, that clients are good at looping you into kind of the down funnel metrics or kind of post conversion behavior of users or leads?
Yeah, I definitely do. I think that's also been something that's whether it's in the app world or elsewhere in digital marketing, that's something that's really become a huge focus. Not I wouldn't say too recent, but in the last 5 years or so, and it's one of those things that some of the clients that are really succeeding in this marketplace are looking at those metrics, right? They're not just looking at the growth side. They're making sure that we're going after the right users. They're providing us or we are also have access to the proper analytics that allow us to really see that value down funnel, and then that flips us back so that our growth mindset is really cohesive with that aspect. And I definitely think that's something clients are getting stronger at communicating.
Out of interest, how did you kind of end up choosing to work in digital growth specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say I had a little bit non-traditional route to marketing itself. That wasn't like the primary focus of my undergrad career, but I did have a lot of experience in sort of analyzing media in general, but more so in sort of the data and analytical side of it. And so as I graduated and started looking into that specifically, I was living in I would call a semi small town in southern Indiana, United States, and actually in like our essentially, my backyard found Hannafin Marketing, which really has quite a roster of like international and national clients, and didn't quite expect that from the city I was living in at the time, and they just ended up being like the perfect match for me, who came in with uh, I would say a little bit lack of experience there, but they were willing to kind of put in the time to provide that and sort of groom a skill set that they saw fit for
Hmm.
this industry.
It kind of brings up an interesting question around kind of what do you need to succeed in growth. You talked about coming from a background of analysis and data, and I think certainly growth dramatizes a tension that's present, I think, in all marketing between the art and the science of it, or creative and what would we call the other side, maybe creative and data, and obviously the kind of really successful companies or really successful strategies will merge both of these things. So what we do here, for example, we have a kind of, when we're running creatives, we're looking at in-ad data, we're looking at how are users interacting with these creatives, when do they drop off, and there is a way to merge them. But do you think that getting started in a career in growth or in digital, you'd better have more of one than the other?
I
Long
you know
long question.
No, no, I love this. I love this question. Actually, Jack is completely in agreement with something that our talent and HR recruitment team talks about a lot, is like the PPC paradox of how you need that very analytical, numbers oriented skill set, but then it flips over into it's very much a creative of art. Sort of the whole like right brain versus left brain, like working simultaneously together. And I struggle to say which one. I feel like you can really succeed with a varied mix of, what percent of you would you call is your analytical strength versus that. It just more or less that you definitely need a background on both sides of those, so, in order for it to work in unison there properly.
Do you think that growth is, talking about kind of marketing more generally, do you think growth is the future of all marketing? We'll sort of see the death of pure kind of brand campaigns, sexy Super Bowl ads. I mean, obviously you can measure, if you're doing your job well, you can measure the impact of a Super Bowl ad down the funnel. But do you think that growth is going to eat the rest of marketing?
I don't think so. I think it's a huge component of it. I think that's like the primary selling point of so much of digital, is that we are able to tell you that we were like, this is your budget, X amount of dollars, and we can exactly tell you, how many users did we grow? What was our base increase? I think we kind of go in a cyclical fashion though, then where we start to talk, where we kind of loop back to that, where if you just completely ignore that branding side of it, then your growth efforts are actually a lot of times restricted there. So I don't think you can like forever just segment those two worlds and say just one is going to cannibalize or take over the other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what about sort of for someone just starting out or considering a career in growth? Do you think there are a lot of opportunities for? I mean, is the market kind of saturated with growth talent, or are there still opportunities for people who want to make it? Is it hard to get started in growth?
I think to a degree it is hard, right? Just in general, because you try to get that experience within college, and then entry level jobs, 1 to 2 years experience. So it's that sort of paradox. But I definitely think there's a ton of demand there still. I mean, it's a market that's growing. Of course, we're seeing quite a bit of change and fluctuations in the short term right now, given the marketplace. But from my experience, there's still quite a bit of growth, quite a bit of opportunities within my own company, and have seen them around. So yeah, I think you make a great point. It's a crowded marketplace, but I don't see sort of those opportunities drying up anytime soon. Even as we kind of enter, a world where machine learning and AI really take over a lot of the more um, remedial day-to-day tasks. I still think that human element and those opportunities are going to be quite abundant.
Let's talk a bit about the market. I mean, obviously, we could talk probably just about what's happened very recently, but looking more broadly, let's say at the last year or two, what are some of the trends you're seeing picking up steam?
So let's see. Uh, right off the back, I don't want to talk too much about the trends that just are happening with, in relation to like the health crisis we're going through. Um, just because I think there's still just a little bit more out there, but I've seen a lot of the trends in this marketplace. One we kind of touched on already is that I think some of the more sophisticated clients have really been, um, you know, there was just such a huge focus. Um, on just UA, right? On just growth. But I think some of the more sophisticated clients have really started doing a great job of connecting lifetime value into it, into retention, into kind of the overall metrics there of actual user quality, not so much just growing their base. I also think some of the trends here that have been really interesting in the market is a lot more sophisticated creative as well. Not so much just like a throw out banners just get like really really large reach, but looking at different engagement, different playables, different platform diversification across it, just really kind of utilizing a lot more varied tactics instead of just sticking to the very like you know best practice obvious platforms out there.
Would you categorize growth marketers as being today as
Hmm.
being risk averse or kind very ready to try new things? Let's run with a new type of creative. Let's try a new channel, or is it sort of I want to stick with social and search. I know what it does, what it says on the tin. I know what to expect.
I would say there, you pretty much can't be risk adverse just because of how quickly the market moves. A lot of those, if you stay completely risk averse, you're going to be in the most crowded landscape all the time, and there's a reason why it's crowded, right? It works, it's reliable, you know exactly what and where you're going to be showing. 100% of the time. It just, but I think you have to go outside of that kind of basic playbook in order to tap into the new inventory and the new trends in a way that really accelerates growth just beyond the traditional sort of schemes there.
And what about challenges? If you sort of now you're obviously going to have to handle this delicately, but some of the biggest challenges you face from partners or kind of clients who let's say don't know how best to work with an agency.
I think that's a great question, just because the biggest thing that you're always kind of competing with in those partnerships, right, is that proper balance of scale versus efficiency. There's always the desire to push higher to get more. Um, uh, and of course, both on my side and on the side of the partner, there's benefit in that scale, right? From both a revenue standpoint and in terms of what that means for just awareness across the market. But it's always kind of that push to stay at the KPIs, that level of profitability for you, and finding that happy medium. Um, One other challenge that kind of comes to my mind when working with partners is, we work in an industry where quite frankly, turnover can be pretty high, right? Um, you can have people, moving on to different new career opportunities. Just in general, the marketplace gets shook up, even when there isn't major circumstances outside of it like we have now. And so, kind of avoiding as much as you can that revolving door of who your team is, whether it's internally or even with the partner. There's a couple I've worked with, you guys included, who I've been working with the same people for 3-4 years now. And I mean, that sounds low, but in the general scheme of the marketplace, that's a lot of cohesion, a lot of time to really optimize on the platform and really just kind of get what we're about and what the partner is about. I think that's the obstacle that has been really big to address.
And you've mentioned a couple of times actually, sort of automation and creative. Do you think, and it relates to our earlier sort of discussion around left brain, right brain. Do you think that more automation will force growth marketers to be more, agencies, in-house, anyone dealing with growth, to be more creative, for want of a better word, to bring more of a human touch? Now, assumedly, this applies to analytics as well, because the machine can probably learn quite a bit, but at a certain point, presumably, a human can look at something and potentially see something that a machine would miss. How do you think automation is going to impact the industry and the people working within it?
I think you're spot on. It's a lot of those things that we can totally take away, and we're skilled at bringing those kind of data and analytical learnings away from it as an industry. Those are the kind of things that machine learning and those algorithms just smoke us out of the water. They're just so much quick at addressing those patterns, kind of zeroing in on that. So I think you're spot on. It's that then it's all about the creative side, right? It's what are we feeding this algorithm now in order to properly get that data, and that breaks down to kind of the creative elements you're talking about, the platforms that we go after, the messaging that we're trying to utilize. That's going to be productive, both up funnel and eventually into the actual growth aspect. So ultimately, yeah, I think it kind of as that really takes on more and more of it, we have to reinvent ourselves in where we provide those contributions.
And looking at channels for a moment, we talked about trying new ones. How do you sort of see the user experience, advertising experience differ from platform to platform? The creative or platform, I say platform to platform. I should probably say channel to channel. Um, how do sort of users experience things differently, and what are the pluses and minuses? You don't have to go through all of them, but
Right,
sort of
right.
high level overview. What do some channels work better for than others?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think a big component of why you need platform diversity is because you're hitting people in every different sort of cycle of it. Like we can't just stay in those areas where it's a hot audience all the time. Like for search example, where they're literally telling us, "Hey, I want your product right now." Yeah, that's great. But at a certain point, that market runs out, right? And so that's why all these other platforms, whether it's preload, social, programmatic display, like you were mentioning, that's where we're able to really kind of energize this growth aspect, where we're now not just going after the demand, we're creating the demand. And so I think that is just an absolutely integral part of a long-term full funnel growth strategy.
What's one channel that sort of has surprised you in the last, let's say, year or two?
Let's see. We, I, I, I wouldn't. So
Tough
let's
one.
see. I'm gonna give you two here. The first one is in my mind, just programmatic display is a huge one. That's where we can really build this, build awareness, but still get really strong users from a lifetime value perspective. I think what surprised me is that. E- Hot versus cold audience, if you target well enough in that cold audience, meaning someone who doesn't necessarily know they need that product yet, the lifetime value of it can still be as good as that person who came in and literally told you, "Hey, I want this app, I want this game, I want this," and that's what we've really seen. I think there's a lot of optimizations you can make in those channels, even in something like a preload when you're looking at different device models or different carriers. There's a lot of tools at your disposal that even though that person might not have known they were in your audience, that eventually is the perfect fit for your app long term, both for the user and for the company itself.
And last, more general, I guess, question: what is the most out of the box marketing you've ever done or seen done?
Ooh, let's see. The most out of the box marketing. So I won't name the client, but I will say the app is pretty largely utilized, right? Like everyone, there's not a person who doesn't have value um, for essentially like the news that they provide. But what we determined is as we were doing some social tests, is that it didn't really matter what we thought our audience was, and it didn't really matter what we zeroed in on. If we were looking at travelers, commuters, fitness buffs, whatever it was, they all seemed to perform relatively the same. Just what we found actually was that the larger the audience we were going after, the better performance we saw. There was
Like a
almost no
dream.
exactly right. It was silly. It was like that was the main correlation I was able to take away. So I was like, all right, you know what? I'm gonna completely. Our team was like, let's completely remove ourselves from this. Let's let the machine learning kind of go after it, and we just targeted nothing. We removed pretty much everything other than geo, and we're like, all right, let's see what happens. And it worked wonderfully. The problem
Wow.
was, yeah, yeah, exactly. The problem is now I've removed myself from that targeting piece completely. And so it circles right back to what you were talking about earlier. And it's, once that component of AI is doing it, how do we reinvent our value? And that's where we really started to zero in on optimizing the creative. And that worked really well. But yeah, it was a scary moment, just taking all those kind of safeguards away and letting it run. I wouldn't recommend
I
that
can
for
imagine.
every. Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't recommend that for every industry or vertical.
Sure.
In fact, very few. But it's worth considering if you some of your some of the variables of your product match what I was talking about a couple
Uh-huh.
seconds ago.
Very cool story. Not what I was expecting a growth marketer to say. We just removed all the targeting and things went really well. But it makes sense. I think if I understand your story correctly. Will, thanks so much for today. This has been really interesting to get your perspective on kind of where we see growth marketing and the industry going. And everyone else, tune in. Thanks for listening, first of all, and tune in next episode for more cool perspectives from awesome growth marketers.